Greetings, everyone. Today I have the honor of reviewing Patrick Rothfuss' masterpiece, The Name of the Wind. This is going to be a long one because I've got a lot to say about this. And this is going to be one of my top books of all time. It's almost perfect. It is so deep. It's long and deep. It is like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's long. Like, it took me like 5 days to read, but it's not. It's like 700 something pages, but it's not long. Like, it's lengthy. It's long because it goes in stages. It's like several books in one almost. It's like some of the stuff from the beginning of the book kind of gets left behind and you forget about it, and it comes back in later, and you're like, oh yeah, that whole thing happened, and this whole thing, and it's like, it's also, like, it's supposed to be a trilogy. It's called the Kingkiller Chronicles. And it's about a guy who's supposed to be, like, one of the most interesting men in the world. And it's also funny to read, like, the reviews of this book. If you go on Goodreads, like, some people hate it. And some people fucking love it. It's been after 15 seconds. Okay, this YouTube algorithm, if you say a curse word in the first 15 seconds, you get demonetized, so I'm going to be careful. Some people hate it, some people love it. I don't understand. The people that hate it, I got to go read these reviews, because I saw one guy reviewing it, and he was saying how the main character's name's Kvoth, and he's got this friend named Bast, and he's like a fairy, goat man type fairy, you know, like the ones from World of Warcraft, whatever they're called, like the demon looking ones. But he's like disguised as a human. And this guy, like, I mean, it has like a rough start to it, because it's kind of like that movie, The Man from Earth, where it's just like a bunch of people sitting around a room talking about this guy. Man from Earth, it was about like a caveman who lived forever, and he was like actually Jesus, and he had this like crazy life and stuff. So the whole movie takes place in this room with these college people talking about it. This starts out in an inn, like World of Warcraft or something, and the innkeeper has this crazy life story, and this guy named Chronicler, he's going to tell him the story of how he became such a legend. And I assume at some point he kills a king, because he didn't in this book. It's called the Kingkiller Chronicles. So he tells him it's going to take 3 days to tell my story, and I assumed this whole thing was going to happen in this book. Like the 3 days was going to happen. But apparently, this book is day number 1. Book 2 will be day number 2 of telling a story, and book 3 will be probably when he actually kills the king or whatever, and gets that king legend name or whatever. So, it starts out slow. And I had just read The Sixth of Dusk by Burning Sanderson, which also takes place in an inn. And I was thinking about the setting for a story I'm thinking about writing, but I don't know if I will or not. But they all kind of got mixed up in my head with this inn. And it started out, there was like these spider demons that were like mushrooms on the inside or something. It didn't really make sense. And they kind of attacked the town, and like, I got confused. And I didn't really like it in the beginning. But then once he starts telling his story, it gets freaking amazing. And the setting is kind of like hard to describe. It's a fantasy setting. It's not like a modern day type of like flintlock pistol kind of area, but it's a kind of a place that you'd have noblemen with like rich asshole noble sons. But you don't, like, get into the aristocracy as much, which I hate when you get really into politics and stuff in fantasy novels. This doesn't do it. This is more like a living, breathing fantasy world where you visit different towns and different groups of people that are living and, like, doing farm work and taking in the harvest and having their little, like, fall festivals. And you have groups that are, like, cruel. You get, like, people beating each other up. It's like real viscerally lived in kind of a world. And so the bad review I was talking about, the guy was saying like it seemed like Kvoth and Bast were like gay lovers or something, and he was trying to like, he couldn't figure out how to deal with the, I don't know what he was saying. It was dumb. It was a dumb review. He didn't get far enough to get to where it got good, I think. Because after he starts telling the story, he tells the story like Kvoth starts out, it's a little bit hard to believe because he's supposed to be like this kind of like prodigy genius, and he can learn languages really fast. And then at one point in the story, he buys a horse, and he's like, I know horses because I grew up with this troupe called the Edema Rue, and they were kind of like gypsy bards. So like musicians that travel and they play music and tell stories and put on theater and do kind of plays and shows. So he has like this whole ability to play music really well, and he can like do theatrical things really well, so he can like kind of pretend to be somebody he's not and like trick people and stuff. So he's got all these skills. And at one point he's buying a horse, and he's like, I know horses because I grew up at the Edema Rue, and they showed me about horses and how to like tell what's a good horse. And he's like 10 years old. Like, how the fuck does a 10-year-old know how to pick a good horse? How much a horse is worth? So it's kind of unbelievable. And the way Patrick Rothfuss makes Kvothe like an overpowered character, but not really. Like, he doesn't really have a lot of powers because the magic system is like really kind of weak sauce, because it's kind of like, it's kind of like based like on Haitian voodoo. It's kind of like you make a link with two things. It's called sympathetic magic, and you can like make things believe that they're a part of something else. So if you connect two pieces of a coin, like the currency is really interesting because the coins are cut into pieces called drabs, you know, and you got like talents that are divided into jots, and so many talents makes up a mark, and then you got silver pennies and half pennies and gold pennies, and like, I love how when like progressive fantasy you'll like see somebody get stronger and stronger. This is more like he gets really fucking broke ass poor, and you see how poor he's like barely surviving. You see how much money he has all the time. Like when he gets any money, you're like, oh shit, he's got like 3 talents right now. He could pay off his debts, or he could buy a new loot or whatever. It's like, what? It's like, this is like progressive fantasy, but like he doesn't actually get strong. So he learns a little bit of sympathetic magic, so he can kind of like light fires from a distance or something with his mind, or like. But he's never really overpowered. He just like, he does things that nobody else can do because he's like crazy skilled. But I don't know if anybody in this world is like really powerful. Like, they talk about this old magician from a long time ago, Tamerlane the Great or something like that. But see, that's a different kind of magic. That's where you can like. There's another kind of magic that's called the naming of things. Like if you know the name of the wind, that's what the book's called. Or if you know the name of fire, you know the name of like, everything has a name. Everything that's like a nature spirit or like an object, everything has a name that if you know it, you can kind of have control over it. So that's kind of different kind of magic that you can do things if you. It doesn't really explain it yet because it's kind of like just book 1. But okay, so it starts out. He's with the Edema Rue, and he's going. He meets this man who's an arcanist. Is that right? I think it's called Arcanist. It's been a long time. He can do that kind of sympathetic magic I'm talking about. And he knows like a lot of other things like chemistry and like a lot of like different kinds of skills and like things you would learn at a college or university, right? He knows like a lot of. So he joins the troupe, and he's helping. I forgot what his job was for the troupe. He did something for the troupe, but he's teaching this young boy Kvothe, when he's like 10 years old. He's teaching him all these things because he just notices he's good at it. He can remember things well. He's like, learns languages really well, so you need to know languages. And he teaches him a bunch of stuff that people in the university that he's trying to get to later, that they're in college, right? And they're like studying all these things. And he already knows all this stuff because this old man taught him. So at some point, these demons attack. His father and mother were making this song about the Chandrian. The Chandrian are these 7 demons with this one guy that's like got black eyes and white hair, and he's like the master of these 7 demons or something called the Chandrian. And there's like these fairy tales that kids would sing, or songs that they would sing, like the Chandrian when they come, like all the iron rusts and the wood rots, and there's blue fire, and that's a sign of the Chandrian. And they come like lightning, and they kill everything, and then they just disappear, and nobody knows why. So his parents were making this song about the demons, that they figured something out that would give them a weakness if the world knew about it. So they came and killed his whole family when he was off doing something, wiped out the whole Edema Rue clan he was with, and he's like childless. But the old man that taught him, he had met this woman, and he'd left behind, so he's gone. So he's still alive. But the rest of his family is wiped out by these 7 demons. So then, the first part of the book, I was loving it. I was just loving the whole thing with the old man teaching him the magic and shit. And then when his family's wiped out, I'm like, oh no, the old man left, now his family's wiped out. Like, I was really loving that. But then it gets even better. Because then he makes it his mission to go to the university and get to that college so he can start studying the magic so he can take on these demons and hunt them down. So he ends up going to this city. It's like this big, massive city. Tarbine. And he, like, there's this whole part of the book, it becomes like Aladdin. And all of a sudden you're reading the story of Aladdin. Like, he's like a ragamuffin, like a kid just trying to survive on the streets. It's a lot like Ender's Shadow. What was the name of that town? I forgot what it was. It's in like Amsterdam or something. It's like he's surviving on the streets. Kids are like beating him up. He's just struggling to find any kind of money and like have food. And he finds this man who's like a charity priest or something like that. He has all these kids that he's taking care of, and like he starts going there and getting little heads up, and then he starts stealing loaves of bread and he'll bring them to that old man. And he starts like living on a rooftop next to a chimney because it's the only place he can find that's safe from all these like people that are trying to kill him. Then there's a nice part of town. He starts begging at the nice part of town. He gets like the silver halfpenny. That's like worth like 20 regular pennies. And you're like, what? And then he loses it in the snow. And you're like, no! Like, he's like so poor. He's so poor. But then I forgot what happens. But he ends up leaving and going off to college eventually. He gets out of that situation. He gets a little bit of money. Man, that was just like a whole book in itself, just that part of the story. But then it keeps going, and then by this time he's going off to university, and you're forgetting about that 7 demons thing. Is like, that's way in the past. Like, that's, you forget about that. So the reason he wants to go to college is because the archives they have there, like tens of thousands of books in this massive archive. And to get into college, you have to take this test where all the 9 masters. There's 7, I think there's 9 masters. They all ask you these questions, and he kind of cheats, and he listens to other people give their answers so he knows what to say, but he's also smart because he already knows a bunch of shit already. But then they ask you like really like weird questions. They throw you some curveballs. They ask you esoteric questions. They ask you like opinionation questions, like what's your opinion on stuff. Trick questions that he like figures out the trick, and he stuns them so much. Like, people like that do good, maybe they'll cost them like 3 talents for a semester. I don't know if it's like 2 months or what it is, but like, the more you know, the less it costs, basically. And he has no money. He does so good, he talks them into paying him 3 talents to stay there and learn. And then he uses that to buy like a couple pairs of shirts, and he gets in like a little room and board kind of situation going on. And he has to like buy something to live off of. So like, you're always like looking at how much money he has, and like he has to go into debt at some point to get into the next semester because it goes up to like he has to pay them 3 talents, then he has to pay them 6 talents. And like, he keeps rising in the ranks of this college. He's got like this arch nemesis, which just makes it great too. He's got this guy named Ambrose, who's like a rich nobleman's son, who's like, he's over the archives. He's like one of the scribes that work there. And he wouldn't let him in. And he gives him his hard times. They have this rivalry the whole time. He starts like fighting him and stuff. And he gets in trouble. He ends up always like getting whipped. But then, and the thing that he did to get whipped, he proves his ability. So it also like levels him up in the ranks. So they keep like making him a higher rank college, university student, whatever. It's crazy. And he does all these like trickeries, like he like takes drugs that prevents him from bleeding. Starting all these like rumors and legends about how powerful he is, and like people call him the Bloodless because he didn't bleed when he got whipped. And he has like this love interest, this girl that keeps showing up, Denna, that like he met her on the road to the college, and then he meets her like months later, and he didn't know if she even remembered him because they looked so different and stuff. And he's like a whole love story with it, and then there's like there's my favorite character is this girl named Ari. I thought she was one of the Fae, but because she lived in like the tunnels, like the sewer system, in this like grate that he ate lunch next to or something on the roof. He ends up at the end going down in there, and she shows him like the underground part, and he like has a secret passage that lets him into the archives because he He gets kicked out of the archives his first time there. The whole reason he's gone to college is to get into the archives and like study about those 7 demons and figure out what's up with them. But they won't let him in. His whole time at college, he's never been able to get there and like read a book. So he has to like get a job with this guy making lamps with using like this magical kind of method. It's in like this big tank of like some kind of acid that they brought in, and it starts a big fire. And he saves this girl's life, so he like gets this legend for like saving her life. But then, I don't know, it's crazy. And then this whole town, he sees like this town this wedding party got burned to death, and he thinks that was 7 demons. So that's why he buys that horse, and he goes down there, and that freaking girl that he's always seeing, Denna, she's down there, and like they end up fighting a dragon. And the dragon's on drugs. This dragon is like a cow that eats trees. And the trees have like this tar resin in it. And that's like a drug that people chew on and they go crazy. They get euphoria and mania and they go crazy. So he ends up trying to kill the dragon with an overdose. Because they found some guys that were making that what do you call it, sweet tar. It's kind of like maple syrup resin. And he gets like what he thinks is a lethal dose, and the dragon eats it, and the dragon goes crazy, and the townspeople just happen to be having a fall festival with a big bonfire, and he's like attracted to fire because he's a dragon, and he like rolls around in it. So he goes to the town, he starts like wrecking the town, and then he goes and like saves the town using magic by pulling this big iron wheel on his head. The whole thing about iron and fire, like being what demons are weak against, is really cool. That's in like the Jim Butcher books. The fairies, the fae, not like the fairies from like Zelda, but like actual fae folk with the goat men and stuff. Those are some of the scariest creatures, because you don't know like how powerful they can be. This whole fae underworld and stuff. It's really cool, but they're weak against iron or salt. Usually is something. Yeah, I'm leaving out a whole bunch because there's a whole part where he gets into like he manages to get enough money script together to buy a lute, and there's this big bar that's like a big tavern where you can play music, and if you do good enough, they give you your talent pipes, which is like the silver pipes that you can wear that shows that you're a talented musician, and then like rich people can hire you and you can make money. You're like, oh crap, he's finally going to get to make some money. He's got his talent lute. He played that one crazy song, and then Denna showed up and started singing back up. he plays this crazy song. It's like basically sounds like 2 or 3 people playing at the same time because he's so good. And his string breaks, and he keeps playing with 6 strings. You're like, we thought you fucked up, but then you started playing with 6 strings. Like, how did you do that? He's like, see, he's just so good at everything. And then like that Ambrose guy had he talked to everybody because he's against him so bad. Every bar like won't hire him, or any noble won't hire him to play music because he talked him out of it. So now he can't make money that way. Like as soon as he gets something, Ambrose takes it away. He's always fucking there, and he's like, finally, Ambrose steals his loot, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And then Ambrose was like, fine, here, threw him his loot. He didn't catch it. It breaks. He goes in front of the council again. They call it going on the horns because the 9 sit in like this curved table, and then they charge him with like all these crimes, but then they expel him from school, but then they suspend the expulsion, but they still have to give him 6 lashings, and then they raise him up to a higher rank because he used the name of the wind to like fight against Ambrose. So they show, oh, you know how to do the naming of the wind, so apparently you're you're good enough. It's so dope, man. And like he keeps getting in trouble, but he also rises in rank at the same time. And then it just says some like it's really, really well written and poetic sometimes. Like the thing with Ambrose at the end, he's always saying like, what was it? I thought he had finally given up on messing with me, but then that day he tried to have me killed, and then it'll like go into the next chapter like, oh, here's how he had these thugs try to kill him, and he killed him with fire and lightning. What? And so then like I thought Ambrose had finally stopped messing with me until that day where he was actually learning to bide his time, and then the day he actually attacked, like he caught me flat-footed, and that ended up how I had to leave the university. But that's a story for another time. And then like, what was it, like the right before the last page, he said something really dope. Oh, that fucking Bast. Here's where I thought it was going to get crazy good, but it didn't really do what I thought it was going to do. So you've got the main story is being told by Kavath about him in the college and his adventures and all this stuff, and then you got the fourth wall layer where they're all like in the inn, him and Chronicler and the Bast and all these townfolk and stuff. So I thought he was going to do like a cliffhanger on the story and then a cliffhanger on the outer story as well. Like you have a double cliffhanger. I thought that would have been dope. Nobody's ever done it, I don't think. So what happens is this demon comes in in the middle. He stops the story for the day. It's the end of day one. The demon comes into the bar. This guy, they already had a demon attack. This one guy has a big iron rod and he beats it to death. So then Chronicler goes up to bed and then Bast sneaks into his room. And then he's basically threatening him because he's telling him that Kavoth is like not himself. He used to be like way cooler, but now he's become like this failed innkeeper because it's the way, like, if you tell somebody they're beautiful, even if they're not, they'll kind of fake it till they make it, until they become that thing. And this is kind of doing the opposite, where Kavoth has convinced himself he's just an innkeeper, and he's not able to do his magic anymore, and he's not able to play his music anymore, and he's a shadow of his former self. And Bast is trying to talk this chronicler into like skipping some of these parts of his story because he tried to write his own story and he couldn't do it because he got mad at himself, and he wants him to be like the old Kavoth that he used to know and love. And then Chronicler's like, I just take people's story for what it is, I can't really control what he says. And he's like, he goes threatening him. It's so dope. He's like, hear my words, manling. Do not mistake me for my mask. You see light dappling on the water and forget the deep, cold dark beneath. You cannot hurt me. You cannot run or hide. In this I will not be defied. I swear by all the salt in me, if you run counter to my desire, the remainder of your brief mortal span will be an orchestra of misery. I swear by stone and oak and elm, I will make a game of you. I'll follow you unseen and smother any spark of joy you find. You'll never know a woman's touch, a breath of rest, a moment's peace of mind. And I swear by the night sky and the ever-moving moon, if you lead my master to despair, I will slit you open and splash around like a child in a muddy puddle. I'll string a fiddle with your guts and make you play it while you dance, or while I dance. What the fuck? That is so dope. And then he says, you are not wise enough to fear me, as I should be feared. You do not know the first note of the music that moves me. So he's talking about how fucking crazy those Fae are, and how strong they are. Like, you're not even smart enough to be afraid of me. That's basically what he's saying. That's crazy. And guess what the second book's called? Wise Man's Fear. So, apparently he goes off to this other place and learns to fight. He gives a little foreshadowing. Kavoth says, tomorrow I'll tell you about how to learn to fight, when I went off to this academy or something like that. So now I'm super psyched. I really want to read the second book, but then I'm super sad because third book doesn't exist. It's like the George R.R. Martin thing, like Patrick Rothfuss. He had the muse speaking to him for 2 books, and it went away. I thought, what's it been, 8 years? I think it's been since The Wise Man's Fear came out, and we still haven't written book 3. I don't know if King Killer Chronicles even tells you how he became a king killer. If he doesn't write it, if it was just the story of how he became a legend, and it was all in this book, I would have been like, oh, that's fine. I'll just book 2 and 3, maybe that's some extra stuff. But this is all this kind of makes out to be a 3-day story, and there's only 2 days storytelling, and then third day just he hasn't, well, nobody knows because he didn't write it. That's the thing about writer's block, man. You get really good story going and you just can't finish it. Maybe you will, I don't know. But still, 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, masterpiece. I had a rough start. I found 1 typo and then 1 something else, I think. But it's a really good story. It's a masterpiece. Makes up for it.